A lost camera came back with 2 summit selfies and a time-stamped radio call around 5:15 p.m. The voice said he'd reached the top of Everest. He was alone. Hours later, silence. That proof would quiet doubters but ignite a bigger question. Why was Bruce Herrod still pushing that late? This wasn't just a tragic end. It exposed choices made on a team that was already under fire, and the answers wouldn't show up until the next climbing season. The expedition was sold as a national first, a new South Africa on the world's highest stage. Cameras rolled, sponsors lined up, and schedules often bent toward publicity. Inside the tents, control tightened, decisions ran top-down. Critics said plans shifted late and too often. A few strong climbers quit before the summit push, citing trust and safety. Sponsors cooled but stayed. Bruce Herrod didn't leave. As photojournalist and climber, he believed the mission could still deliver. He handled images, updates, and his climbing load. He knew the only fix for bad press was a clean summit. Then May 10-11 wrecked other teams. The South Africans held back, then reset for a later window, when the route was refixed and crowds thinned. Publicly, the message stayed upbeat. Privately, roles kept moving with weather, health, and politics. Rumors followed the leader. Supporters called it focus. Critics called it spin. Radios carried logistics and sound bites. By late May, the team split between faster climbers and those moving on a slower schedule. The South Call became a clock. Wind, daylight, and media pressure all ticking. Who goes when and how late is acceptable would decide everything. The roster shrank before anyone clipped into summit ropes. Several capable climbers quit, citing trust and safety. They said decisions moved without buy-in, turnaround times drifted, and risk crept up while optics stayed front and center. Those who remained tried to block out the noise and stick to the acclimatization plan. Then May 10-11 hit other teams. High on the route, lines snarled, weather flipped, and rescues dominated radio traffic. The South Africans stood down. They waited for the route to be refixed and for the wind to settle. The pause made sense, but it stretched nerves. Every day added pressure from home and burn rate on the mountain. Inside the camp, arguments sharpened. Some pushed for strict daylight cutoffs and tighter buddying. Others wanted to move the moment a window cracked to avoid crowding. Sherpa carries were reshuffled. Oxygen math was reworked. Who gets which bottle, how many spares at the South Call, what flow rates to hold. Each tweak changed timing, partners, and the margin for error. Faster climbers aimed for the first clear day to stay ahead of traffic. Slower climbers targeted the next slot, banking on fresher ropes and fewer jams. Everyone knew the real limiters: wind above the balcony, cues at the Hillary step, and the clock. Miss daylight, and the descent becomes a gamble. Summit day split the team. The early pair moved in the dark, hit the south summit with time to spare, and kept a workable buffer on oxygen and light. Their radios sounded upbeat, route clear, wind manageable, progress steady. By late morning, they stood on top and started down with daylight in hand. Bruce Herrod was behind them on a later schedule. He moved methodically, stopping to shoot frames and manage gloves, mask, and leash. Pace mattered now. Each pause 8 minutes he couldn't recover. The ridge did not care about press needs or proof of summit photos. It taxed anyone who lingered. Turnaround time came and passed. Debate crackled over the radio. Some voices urged caution. Others said the weather held and the ropes were set. Bruce kept climbing. He had trained for this, carried a camera for this, and the first South African summit shots would be his. But the clock was the real judge. Afternoon light thinned. He was now effectively solo above the south summit, with most traffic already lower on the ridge. A partner would have argued harder to turn him, or matched pace to keep the margin. Alone, he managed his mask, checked flow, and pressed on toward the top. Near 5:15 p.m., the call came through. He said he'd reached the summit. Relief at base, proof for the sponsors, pride for the team. Also a hard fact, it was late. The route back ran across the Cornice Traverse and down past the Hillary Step, terrain that punishes slow feet after sunset. He took the summit shots he wanted and turned to descend. Oxygen was finite, legs were heavy, the ridge was busy earlier but now nearly empty, which meant less help if anything went wrong. Every section demanded focus. Clip, move, check footing, repeat. The day's bold choice had delivered the summit. The bill would be due on the way down. He started down after 5:15 p.m. The light was fading. The route back ran across the Cornice Traverse, down the Hillary Step, and on toward the South Summit. It's exposed and slow even in daylight. After sunset, every move takes longer. Radio traffic thinned. Earlier, climbers had moved through in a crowd. Now the ridge was nearly empty. Less help, fewer eyes. If a knot snagged or a crampon slipped, recovery would cost minutes he didn't have. Oxygen was the margin. Flow rate, bottle change, and mask seal had to be right. Frost builds, valves stick. A minor issue at sea level turns major at 8,700 meters. Fatigue makes small tasks clumsy. Headlamp batteries fade in the cold. Each delay drags the pace. The Hillary Step was the choke point. Fixed lines help, but switching carabiners and descending that rock step with a big pack is slow. In the dark, it's slower. If he arrived there after dusk, he faced the hardest moves at the worst time. No one logged a clean sighting after late afternoon. Teams lower on the route focused on their own descent. Camp 4 waited for a headlamp to appear above the triangle face. It didn't. Calls went unanswered. Wind rose and fell. Night settled on the ridge. Why he stopped remains unclear. It could be a tangle at a belay, a misstep, or a mask problem that spiraled. It could be a wrong anchor and low visibility. At that altitude, one error compounds fast. What's certain is simple: he never reached the South Col. By morning, hopes narrowed to a miracle walk-in. It didn't happen. Weather stayed workable, but there was no movement from above. The team marked the time and logged the silence. The question moved from rescue to recovery. Proof of summit existed on the radio. Proof of what happened next did not. Not yet. The answer came the next spring. Climbers moving through the upper route found a body at the base of the Hillary Step. Still on the ropes, reports from that season described him hanging where the descent line funnels into the step. Evidence of trouble during the rappel. Details matched Bruce Herrod. Clothing, gear, and position on the route. The scene suggested a rope issue near the end of the rappel, entanglement, or a mismanaged device, followed by exposure in the cold and wind. A later summary listed the cause as a rope accident at roughly 8,800 meters. An American team recovered his camera. Subsequent accounts named Peter Athens among those who reached the site, cut him free, and brought the camera down. When the film was developed, 2 self-portraits on the summit confirmed the radio call from 5:15 p.m. Had there been doubt, the photos removed it. The location and the rope evidence made the mechanics clear. He summited late, began down after dusk, met the key bottleneck in the dark, and a rappel problem at the Hillary Step ended the descent. No one from his team saw the final minutes. The mountain, the fixed line, and the camera told the rest. The photo settled the core question. He summited. Debate shifted to timing and oversight. Why was he still above the South Summit near dusk? And who enforced turnarounds? Supporters said conditions were workable, and each climber owned their pace. Critics said a solo late push should have been halted. The camera cut both ways. It delivered the proof sponsors needed, but it also captured the problem. Daylight fading with the descent still ahead. In debriefs, calls for stricter cutoffs above the South Summit grew louder, along with tighter buddying on the ridge. Route changes after 2015 altered the Hillary Step, but the lesson holds: reach that bottleneck in daylight, manage the lines cleanly, keep oxygen and time in reserve. His record remains a national first. His timeline is now a warning in briefings everywhere. Herrod's legacy sits in that tension. Achievement verified, margin exhausted. One decision put him on top. The next left no room for recovery. Here's what's certain. Bruce Herrod reached the summit late in the day, radioed confirmation around 15 p.m., and died on the descent at the Hillary Step after a rappel issue. His camera confirmed the ascent. The location of his body explained the failure point. That sequence is not in dispute. What stays contested is judgment. Why was a solo push allowed that far into the afternoon? Were turnaround times clear and enforced? Did media pressure and the promise of a national first shape pacing and choices? Supporters say conditions allowed it, and personal agency rules high-altitude climbing. Critics say leadership must set hard limits when daylight and oxygen margins collapse. The practical takeaways are straightforward. Above the south summit, strict cutoffs matter, pairing matters. Bottlenecks must be reached in daylight with buffer on oxygen, batteries, and energy. Proof of a summit is not the goal. Safe return is the standard. Herrod's record stands as a first for his country and as a caution cited in briefings everywhere. The photos gave him credit, the timeline gave future teams a checklist. In the end, Everest rewarded the push, and the descent demanded terms he no longer had. The question that lingers is simple. When the summit is still ahead and the clock is gone, who says stop and who listens?